Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Green Room. We're here on DisrupTV, and of course, we do our introductions in reverse order. So we're going to start with Margaret and Jeffrey, and of course, we're going to introduce yourselves and just tell us where you're coming in from. What are you talking about today, Margaret?
Well, hello, Ray. It's Margaret Moore, also known as Coach Meg. I'm here with my dear friend and book partner. We wrote a book together called The Science of Leadership: 9 Ways to Upgrade Your Impact. So basically using science to teach us how to lead better.
Wonderful. Jeffrey, thanks for joining us from across the Atlantic. Where are you coming in from?
My pleasure. I'm coming in from Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and I am happy to be with my co-author, collaborator, and we're going to talk about how everyday leaders can put science to work for themselves to become more effective.
Very, very cool. Our second list, Henrik, is not here yet, but when he does, we will bring him in. And if he isn't, we'll give everybody a little bit more time. Lee Rainie, welcome. Where are you coming in from? What are we talking about?
Ray, I'm coming in from suburban Washington, D.C. I run the Imagining the Digital Future Center at Elon University, which is over 100 years old, so it's not that Elon. And we've done a lot of work over the years about the impact of digital technologies, and it's focused a lot now on AI.
Wonderful. Are you in the blast radius or are you outside of the blast radius?
Oh, no, I'm going to be a goner if the big one hits.
Well, wonderful. Well, we're going to jump into our video. We'll come back to you, Lee. And of course, Margaret, Jeffrey, please, Coach May, hold on, and we'll jump in. Here we go. Here's the count. 3, 2, 1. Hey, everybody, welcome. This is Ray Wong with DisrupTV. My co-host, Vala Afshar, is out today, and we'll catch him out for the next show on 8/8. This is episode number 405, and we kick it off with my good friend, Lee Rainie, Director, Imagining the Digital Future Center at Elon University. If you don't know Lee, he's the one putting together these amazing studies talking about the human impact of accelerating digital change. Before that, you may have known that he was there 24 years at the Pew Research Center, studying what the internet and technology were doing to society. At the Pew Internet Project, he produced more than 850 reports. That's more reports than I've ever written as a research analyst about the social, political, and economic impact of 4 technology revolutions: internet, broadband revolution, the mobile connectivity revolution, the social media revolution. That's when I got to know him. And the AI revolution we are participating in right now. Lee is co-author of Network, the New Social Operating System, and 5 books about the future of the internet based on project surveys. You can follow him on X at Rainie, Raini. Thank you for joining the show, Lee.
Ray, it's always fun to be with you, and I got to start by thanking you always for your engagement with our work. You're the best.
Oh, I love that survey. I look forward to seeing what's there. I was so excited to read it. I jumped into it, and the next thing I know, you're on the show. So this is great. So you organized this research around gathering expert insights, trying to figure out what's happening about the impact AI might have on 12 special human traits and capabilities. These are traits we think that make us human. Why did you pick these 12?
You remember when we first started talking about this stuff about a decade ago, there was a lot of concern, and there continues to be a lot of concern about the impact of AI on human experience and economics and jobs and things like that. But the answer that was always sort of the escape clause for humans was that we have special social traits. We have special emotional traits. We have what is called soft skills, sometimes by economists, that are very distinguishable from machine learning traits. And so their answer for more than a decade has been humans are going to survive in important ways as AIs get better and better, just because we have these special skills and traits. So we did a big literature review and identified that these 12 things that you described. I won't go through them all, but it's things like social and emotional intelligence, empathy, the capacity to trust others, the critical thinking, the ability to find purpose in life and do agency, creativity and curiosity are also part of the mix too. So we asked these experts, as AI gets better and better and surpasses humans in a whole bunch of ways, how will these 12 traits fare? Will there be more negative impact by AI or positive impact by AI? And we found a lot of negativity, although some bright lights in the midst of it too.
So talk about the traits where people felt they were going to be more negative, that it was going to impact the existence of humanity.
So it starts with sort of social and emotional intelligence. In an interesting way, these experts were more likely to say the impact of AI would be negative than be positive on this sort of basic element of human uniqueness almost. They also worried about critical thinking, how AI might sort of take over, or people would begin to default to AI systems as they were making decisions rather than amassing all the evidence and all the insights that they would normally master if they didn't have these tools available to them. We also talked about identity and purpose. And one of the sort of important things to be thinking about as AI gets better and better is if it takes over a lot of our decision making, if it supplants us in sort of key aspects of life, are humans going to be demoralized? Are we going to feel obsolete? And these experts were more likely to say that would happen than would say the opposite.
Wow. Now, what about the other way around, being more positive than negative? Because you got 12 traits here. And I mean, I wonder, I'm trying to think, is AI going to be more curious and have the capacity to learn than humans?
It was a big debate as we were forming this list, as we did our literature review. We were trying to decide whether we should list leadership qualities as one of these special skills. And for a variety of reasons, not least of which is I really couldn't figure out how to ask the question smartly, we left leadership off the list. But it turns out these experts, including you in your answer, basically said that the three elements or three big traits that we talked about that will survive the onslaught of language models and other AI systems were curiosity, creativity, and decision-making and problem solving. So in a way, those are the planks of leadership. And these experts sort of filled in the blank for us by saying, yeah, under the right kind of leadership that's anchored in curiosity and creativity and sort of really discerning problem solving, we'll work our way out of this mess, according to these experts. So there are rays of hope here, even though in the majority of circumstances, experts were pretty downcast.
Wow. And, leadership in an age of AI is going to look very different. We'll probably hit that topic a little bit later in the program. But I think what was interesting for you is really, these are future-looking reports that you do here. And, some are dystopian, some are exciting predictions about where they're going. What were some of the wildest predictions from some of these folks? It's an interesting roster of people who respond. I look at the list and I can't believe I'm even on that list. So.
Oh, you absolutely belong on that list. I'm going to start by citing your own answer, which wasn't sort of surprising, but it was really discerning about the issues of leadership and the adjustments we're going to be making. You wrote that human purpose is going to change in the next decade as AI systems roll out, and the pressure to reduce risk will make life pretty boring. Wow. And you said in corporate circumstances or any kind of decision-making circumstances, organizations will have to ask 4 questions about when and where humans are inserted in the decision-making process. You said question 1 is, do we have a full decision-making machine intelligence? Or do we augment the machine with a human? Or do we augment the human with a machine? Or do we have an all-human decision to make? And I think that's, in a way, that's a beautiful capsule summary of what leadership can amount to these days. But the other sort of funkier predictions we got, there were those who said that we're going to have AI-based religions, that there will be an AI deity avatar that will gather up a crowd of people and be very convincing.
AI masters.
Vince Cerf, one of your favorite guests on your show, had a really smart idea that soon enough, we're going to have systems that require pure proof of humanity as we deal with the wider world, because there's going to be mass confusion about whether people, it already exists now in social media. Am I dealing with a human being? Am I dealing with a machine? And so there are going to have to be verification systems, Vint thinks, to convince people that there's a human on the other end of the encounter rather than a machine. There's a wonderful futurist based in the UK named Tracy Follows, who talked about how the interplay of digital agents and avatars and things like that are going to convince people, are going to propel people into what she called parasocial life. We're going to become depending more and more on our agents and become more attached to them and things like that. And it may sublimate our personal growth to these machines. And then I got to tell you my final favorite one. I'm just going to read it to you because it's so charming and so scary at the same time. Paul Sappho from the Institute for the Future.
I love Paul.
He's the best. He goes, the best-selling book of 2035, so a decade when we were asking what are these changes going to amount to, will be a book called What Was Human? And it will be written by an AI. And purchases by other AIs will vastly outnumber purchases by human readers, because by 2035, humans have become so accustomed to AIs reading books for them and then reporting out the summary that most humans can't read books anymore. But the surprise is that the book is the first in the series written exclusively for an audience of AIs eager to finally understand the puzzle of what it means to be human. It's pretty charming, scary, and old and freaky.
The Star Trek data problem, the quest to be human.
Yeah.
I've had some very interesting debates with folks over the last 3 weeks. And one of them is whether we're going to enter the world's largest white-collar recession. I've had a conversation with someone else where we're talking about like the lack of understanding patterns, and being able to see patterns as humans might inhibit our ability to make better decisions as we work into decision automation. And then my favorite one was, maybe we were the robots that were cast aside on another planet because we were so decentralized and not controlled by anything that they left us there wondering if like we would kill ourselves or if we'd actually create anything interesting. So how does that jive with some of the other conversations
It fits perfectly.
essays in the report? Because were there some themes that carried out through many of the other answers, or was it just like, here we go? These are all disparate pockets of themes, you know?
First of all, the conversations you have are sort of dead center of what people are thinking about as they think about the future. Some of the broader patterns that we saw in the data included the idea that we're going to get new divisions in society organized around people's sort of mindset. The people who are enchanted by this and really excited by it and are insatiably curious and have a learning mindset, they are going to go to town in many respects on these tools, and we'll find ways to sort out what the machines are good at versus what they're good at, and we'll find ways to live a hybrid life, a sort of co-intelligence life that seems pretty satisfying and pretty purposeful. But at the same time, there are lots of ways, as you consider these 12 human traits that we asked about, there are these experts who basically say, if you don't have that mindset, if you are not curious, or you default to things that seem smarter than you, or if you're just too lazy, basically, to do the background research to get things done, you're going to get hammered in this world. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of worry about a big segment of society losing a sense of meaning and purpose in their lives. And we've already seen in our culture that as the Oxycontin epidemic came through, fentanyl, as people lost manufacturing jobs, particularly in the Midwest, you've seen life expectancy rates go down, because this is a segment of the population that's struggling to find ways to create purpose in their lives.
So one of the interesting ones that I remember reading was the one around Peter Levine about unemployment and job insecurity will make people poorer and less fulfilled. That was scary to me.
Well, it is, and that's the starting point for so many people and so many experts thinking about AI. What's it going to do to jobs? And I think the big insight that we've learned since we first asked you and others in about 2013 to talk about this subject is that jobs aren't fixed things. The name of a nurse might stay the same, but what nurses do nowadays is different from what they were doing a decade or 20 years ago. And so it's buckets of skills that are at issue now. And there are certain jobs, white collar jobs among them, that are more exposed to AI interventions and AI improvements than other kinds of jobs. And it's, again, sort of as people take stock of where they fit in this world, they're going to have to make some big decisions about how they adjust their lives and how they maybe adjust their thinking about what a meaningful and purposeful life is. And, we had a prelude of all of this in the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, when the carnage in jobs around the world was so great. And, in some respects, these experts are thinking that the next reckoning is going to be even more dramatic than that one.
Well, what's crazy is we had this scenario where we're looking at, what was going to happen when autopilots, right? When cars were driving themselves, when planes were driving themselves, like how would we actually make decisions? Or we even be allowed to make decisions? And that formed one of the answers I sent back to you. Think about this. It's 2050 of planes going from Newark to San Francisco or San Francisco to Newark. A bird strike hits, right? Autopilots engaged. There's 200 people on the plane, 10 million people on the ground, 100,000 that might be affected. And the algorithm is like, this is an easy answer. Abort the plane, of course. And we're so lucky that maybe sometime in the 2000s, some pilot named Captain Scully landed a plane on the Hudson. And we know that there's a 0.003% chance that you could pull that off. As a human, we would take that chance every single time. And as an AI, they would actually de-risk the issue. And so the question is, how will that decision be made? But actually, it's not even that. Where's the liability, right? That's going to be the question. In fact, you might even be asked, would you like to abort the plane or would you like to re-up on your insurance policy?
Exactly.
So that makes me so worried,
It is. One of the most interesting questions that you're raising here is about legal liability. And we're hosting a conference on this report and these issues in September. One of the
where and when, so everybody knows.
September 17th at the Research Triangle Institute, or think tank in Durham, North Carolina. One of the authors presenting there will be a Duke law scholar who basically has argued that it's almost inevitable that we are going to give AI agents rights under the current legal regime. He's basically argued that we've already given rights to non-human things. We give them to corporations. There are some animal species now that have rights. And so by those definitions, and certainly by the level of which AI might impact decisions in people's lives, they're going to be given some kinds of rights. And then the really interesting issue is, how do you weigh human rights versus machine rights? And how do you do the utilitarian calculations that you're suggesting that plane going down would be making?
There it is. This September 17th, 8 to 6 p.m., RTI International Headquarters, 3040 East Cornwallis Road in RTP, North Carolina. This is where it's going to happen. So this is really where you guys are going to do this event. That's some great speakers that are having here. So I'm looking at this right now. All right. So let's wrap this up. Where do we see that future? If you're going to go back and think 3 years out, 5 years out, what are the questions you're going to ask? Because I think the answers are going to be very different.
It's a target-rich environment, I'll tell you that. Right now, what I'm trending towards, and I'd love your reaction to it, is to think about the secondary and tertiary effects on humans and society that these things will create. So we know that big technologies always sort of have direct impacts on human behavior, but they also affect communities in big ways. The classic example is the telephone essentially enabled the rise of suburbs. Nobody predicted it at the moment people started using telephones, but the interplay between people in their offices and people in their neighbors and things like that gave us, a brand new way of living. And same with the telegraph, same with the television, same with radio, same with personal computers and things like that. They've created sort of downstream effects that are incredibly important. Matter of fact, even more important than the original effect. And we're going to try to get people like you to tell us what they think some of those impacts might be.
Well, you know what? I hope we're not going down the Idiocracy movie slant. If you saw that, that's the one where the army person wakes up by accident 50 years in the future or something like that. There's soda coming out of the water fountains. The average IQ has dropped because everything's spoon fed to everybody. I hope we end up more like Star Trek, right? Where we're able to pursue knowledge and insight and not worry about money. But I'm sure there's a war that happened in between, that pursuit of knowledge and happiness. So I don't know. I like to be the optimist, but I have no clue what's going to happen. So,
well, that's the fun part, at least being a researcher now.
oh, it's awesome. Well, if you haven't seen the report, go to the Imagining the Digital Future Center. It's there. It's on Elon University's site. And of course, we're here with Lee Rainie. He is one of the best in terms of pulling this type of information together. And more importantly, he's the director of Imagining the Digital Future Center at Elon University. Thanks a ton for being on the show. We're going to bring Margaret and Jeffrey up soon. So
thanks. Anyway.
Very cool. All right. Let's bring up our next set of guests. So, hello, how are you guys doing? Welcome.
Hello, Ray. We're good.
Hello.
I'm going to attempt to do your introductions, and of course, wait for that. And of course, this is a very interesting book, and especially for those who are falling on leadership, and always wondered if leadership was more an art or science. We're going to find out the answer. So yeah, let's quickly do introductions. Margaret, Coach May, is co-authors of The Science of Leadership, 9 Ways to Expand Your Impact. More importantly, if you've seen Coach May's work, it blends leadership, coaching, and science, and comes from 30 years in C-suite roles, and of course, leading startups in biotech, and of course, 2 decades of professional coaching and coach training. Oh my God, I probably need to come see you. For 25 years, she's been a prolific translator of science into coaching, training, and leadership practices. It's going from qualitative to quantitative, and of course, Margaret's vision for this book is to help bring scientists, leaders, and coaches together to foster leadership excellence and support everyday leaders far and wide. Margaret, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Ray. It's great to be with you.
And we got Dr. Jeffrey Hall. He's also co-author of The Science of Leadership, 9 Ways to Expand Your Impact. And of course, he's been focusing on leadership for over 30 years as an HR leader with multiple corporations, co-founder of a leadership development consultancy, nonprofit executive director, and coach to leaders across the globe. He brings years of translating science into leadership as a consultant, a psychologist, and teacher at NYU, and of course, Harvard Medical School. In writing this book, Jeff is excited to see his chosen professions, leadership and coaching, come together in terms of a scientific model. So, hey, this is wonderful, and we're so excited to have you here. Let's start a little bit about the 9 capacities. In fact, we've got a little bit more time than we thought, so we can go deeper if you want, but start with the beginning. How did you choose those 9? Because I find them very distinct.
Yes, well, maybe I'll take that, Jeff, if that's okay.
Sure.
I'll start. So Ray, there is a universality around the structure of the human mind and personality that is not widely known. This is my second book using the same framework, but there is a map that is implicit in this, which relates to Gardner's intelligences and Enneagram's drives and Carl Jung's functions, and I've been working on that for an hour a day by myself for 12 years. And so this natural order and structure gave us, and Jeff is close to it as well. He's written about many of these capacities as well, and this gave us a structure and to organize the maybe 100 topics in leadership in the research. I mean, it's been going on 50 years. There's a lot of topics, and this structure gave us a way to put things in place that made sense and that allowed us to cover the whole. So in a way, the structure is validated by being able to hold all the science. So you could put inspiration with transformation. You could put strategic leadership with sharing leadership. You could put half of emotional intelligence related to self and conscious, the other half in relational. So just to give you an example, it was like a major sort, of all these Lego blocks, and then putting them in a place that when you read it, you get the sense, wow, this makes sense. And at the end of it, it feels whole.
Wow. So good leaders stack 9 of these traits together. Is that what you're saying? And Jeffrey, is that what you're saying?
Nobody's got all of them. That's what we're trying to help and that may be one way that we're going to be able to stay in the leadership role with AI, is to get a whole lot better as leaders.
Got it. So this is changing the way we look at leadership. Any of those capacities, Jeffrey, that you thought were ones that are the hardest ones for leaders to learn that you saw across the leaders you've coached?
Well, they're all challenging. And the framework that Margaret just elaborated sort of naturally fell into what, as coaches, we think of as a lifelong learning journey. In other words, you don't necessarily, the research indicates that you could pick and choose any particular style of leadership, like servant leadership or authentic leadership or transformational leadership. But as we went through the research and started to develop a framework, we recognize that as coaches, we always work through a journey with our clients, and they actually start with conscious leadership. So conscious leadership is at the core, it's sort of foundational. And then you move through the 9. And as I said, it's really a lifelong journey to develop yourself as a leader and move toward wholeness, as Margaret mentioned. And ultimately, you may have a strength in one capacity. You may have an area where you've never even heard of that particular, like agile leadership or servant leadership, or you may never think of yourself as being a positive leader and recognize that that's a particularly distinctive style of leadership. So it's kind of a journey. And we started the book with an assessment, keeping in mind that we're coaches. So we're always thinking about ways that our readers can put this into action. So we started the book with an assessment. So readers have an opportunity to ask themselves, where do I fall in this list of 9 capacities? What are my strengths? What are the surprises? What might I need to work on? And then you can actually either dive into it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or you can go towards the area that you're more drawn to, or a particular capacity that might jump out at you as a surprise or something you never even thought to work on.
It's interesting. You have something in the book, if I remember, that talks about motivation and confidence, I think. It's like a chart that actually says whether people are doing it or not doing it or not ready. How does that work?
That's a great question, Ray. So the science of the forces of motivation and confidence comes from health behaviors. Like exercising or eating. It's there's several models together. And the rule of thumb is that across, virtually any area of behavior change, including, organizational change, the 2 forces that determine whether people move forward is whether they want to and they believe it's possible. And those 2 things, the drive and the confidence, they go up and down, and they need to be above a certain level for you to stay in motion. Okay, so what happens when we say to a team, okay, we're all going to get more agile or more transformational? Well, some of them are like motivation out of 10, confidence out of 2, motivation out of 3, confidence of 7. Like, it's a real mixed bag. And the leader just kind of jumps in and says, we're all doing this. And unless you actually work with each person's motivation and confidence to get them at least at a 6 or 7, so they'll actually move instead of sit there and resist, then you're just going to end up blowing in the wind. So that is, it's a beautiful formula because it works, and you can use it anywhere in any behavior change. So we suggest, because there's 9 things to change, you start there. What do you want, and what do you think you can? Even if you want all of them, you're probably going to have more confidence in some.
That makes a lot of sense. And we're seeing a lot of those capabilities. These are things that, we see it in the behavior design process when people build that into systems, as well as we see that in some of the coaching. But what do we do with challenges, right? People are trying to figure out AI, economic disruption. We're seeing massive transformation. Leaders actually have to be able to guide and drive people in that direction. How do they navigate these new challenges?
I mean, the first thought that I have, and I was listening to the last segment about AI, and in the way we structured these capacities, we move, as I said, from the ground that is like consciousness, authenticity, all the way from self-oriented, other-oriented to system-oriented. And when you get into the more sophisticated leadership capacities, you're really starting to look at ways that you can cultivate a collaborative, what we call a we-focused leadership capacity, the ability to work with others and empower their leadership capabilities so that it doesn't fall just on your shoulders as the leader. And I think when you think about today's challenges, the disruptions that everyone is facing, the most successful leaders are going to be those that can pull from others, not just feel like they have to have all the answers. They're going to be able to be stepping back and looking at their team and thinking, who can I enlist to be creative with me, to come up with strategies, to come up with visions, to work through challenges. And that's really where we get into shared leadership, servant leadership, and transformational leadership, which is pulling together all of the capabilities of your team to get truly creative and work together as a leadership team, rather than just one person sitting at the top of the pyramid, sort of looking down and directing, because that's just not going to cut it. I mean, I was listening to all the challenges we're going to face with AI. We're going to need each other. Leaders are going to need to elevate their teams. They're going to need to look for creativity in the junior folks, in the middle level folks. They're going to have to work toward bringing the best out of everyone. And that's really when you get into that more sophisticated transformational leadership capacity.
So this could be why humility and authenticity are important for leaders to cultivate. Way back in 2017, I think we did something at the World Economic Forum in one of the sessions talking about core traits of leadership. And those were integrity, inspiration, inclusiveness, authenticity, and transparency. And we tried to balance up between responsible and responsive leadership. And we totally missed the piece on humility. It was like we realized responsible was, decisive versus responsive, which was pensive. Responsive was composed versus passionate with a responsive. It was collective versus individual, principled versus adaptive, demanding versus compassionate, accountable versus empathetic, and focused versus opportunistic. And here I'm reading this. I'm like, how did we miss humility? So talk a little bit more authenticity and humility here.
That's a great point, Ray. Let's talk about the research, because that's what we are trying to bring to everybody. So there is authenticity first. So we're at the stage in leadership research where we're not just doing individual studies, we're doing a meta-analysis of hundreds of studies on one topic. So on authentic leadership now, there are hundreds and hundreds of studies. And what's now been shown is that being authentic, which means not being your higher self, what do you value, what's important, what's your purpose, being authentic, living by that, that's good for the leader's well-being. But it turns out that it doesn't have any impact on others' performance. What a leader does that has impact on others' performance and the organizational performance is that leaders care about what everyone else values. And that gets combined with what the leader values, and then you have this collective purpose, not just this is my purpose that we're all aligning around. And so the need for authenticity is more about caring about the authenticity of others. Okay, so then let me take humility. So there's a review of 212 studies on humility and leadership. I mean, did you know there were 212 studies?
No.
I mean, that's actually a pretty substantial, and that's a few years ago. So there's going to be a lot more. So humility is interesting because being humble doesn't impact your own performance as a leader based on all of these studies, which means you can be arrogant and your performance will not change versus being humble. Right? Remember, authenticity helped you, but humility doesn't. But humility helps everyone else perform better. So if you're taking up all the oxygen, your light's shining so bright, others don't perform and the organization doesn't perform it well. So the reason to be humble is a humble one. It's not for you, it's for them. And then you move into service, which is, we put humility in servant leadership, because if you are being humble for them, you're in service, right? Not all the time, because there's a caveat. like anything, there's too much of any good thing. And when there's an interesting study in China, and we quoted research from 22 countries, and interestingly, the research, these fundamentals don't change.
So there's no cultural differences at all?
Yes, but not as many as you'd think.
Okay.
So the study in China showed that leaders in a crisis, the followers want directive, powerful, in charge. They don't want too much humility. They get worried. The leader's weak. But in everyday normal business processes, then humility is helpful. So there's a moment to be humble, and there's a moment to be strong and forceful and get out in front. And that's what's important about all this, Ray. You know, you can say you want authenticity and transparency and all of this, but there's always and is that in the right dose at this moment? Right.
Now that leads to me to ask this question around that I mindset versus the we mindset, because when things get chaotic, when crisis hits, right, some people tend to come more inward, some people tend to go out more. What is this I versus we piece that you guys are talking about?
Well, I think what I pointed to when I talked about the 3 levels that are at a more sophisticated set of capacities: shared leadership, servant leadership, and transformational leadership. And Margaret was just talking about the humble part of servant leadership, that at the end of the day, when you move into those more sophisticated capacities and you start to build out your ability to elevate and empower others, then you can work on challenges where you're not just the only person responsible for the solution. And the leader doesn't have to necessarily feel like that kind of accountability just falls on him or herself. The accountability falls on the entire team. And the idea is to actually look for opportunities to distribute the leadership responsibilities and to hold others accountable, to really elevate their capabilities, their creativity, their innovation. And that's going to be really crucial when we deal with challenges like AI or any other really disruptive situation, is that we're going to need to get everybody's brain in action. We're going to need to bring out the courage and the creativity and the curiosity and the talents of everyone involved, not just the people at the top. And, you know, the paradigm that we've all kind of grown up with of the more experience you have, the more mature you are, the older you are, therefore the more wiser you are, all of that has some validity. Certainly you have greater experience. But the reality is that some of the most creative solutions in today's world come from the younger generations, come from folks earlier in their careers. They may be willing to take risks, to try out new technologies, to think more optimistically about what's possible. And so the collective approach, the we approach to leadership, is actually a really sophisticated way of seeing the system. We call it the system level, where you step back as a leader and you really look at the entire organization and think, how can I leverage the creativity of the people within the organization, all the way from the top, all the way down?
Wow. We're 10 days out from the book's publication. You guys are on fire. This is very interesting. Last question to you guys. Moving to action. We talk about it. It's theoretical. You have a last chapter that's kind of like it's basically your bias for action. What do you tell folks that you coach?
Well, you know, you brought up the readiness to change. That's the balance of motivation and confidence, the 2 drivers. And so then when you're ready, then you've got to use the model, basically have a vision for where you're going, and like what does great look like, you know, where are you going, and then the what's my strategy, and the why is this important to me, and then the execution. So it's a whether you're changing an organization and yourself, it's the same set of questions. You set a compass for the vision, you know it's important, so your motivation's good, and then you make steps that you believe you can implement, and you just keep developing these practices until they become routine. And clearly some of these areas may be more challenging and you may need to take smaller steps. Others, you may take larger steps. But the change process is the same, whether it's yourself, whether it's your team, or whether it's the whole organization. And, you know, Ray, after your first talk on AI, what I think is really important for everyone to think about is that we're leaders here. It's us that sets the vision for AI. We can pull the plug on it's just a plug, right? The power source, once you plug, there's nothing there. And so I think we need to step up, realize first that we're being called to be way more competent as leaders than we've ever had to be. And then to set a vision for AI and then take the steps to move towards there, instead of being in this, you know, the world's on fire kind of place that nobody thinks clearly, nobody moves forward. So we really need to move from fear to direction, vision, and take the right steps.
We're the last generation of managers to only manage humans. Jeffrey, what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with Margaret, and I was thinking about a team that I'm working with currently, which is for private equity partners, and they are trying to work together effectively. And using the 9 capacities from this book, they basically step back and ask themselves, which of the capacities are they most comfortable with? What are their strengths? What do they resonate with? And then what are the capacities that they either had never heard of or they thought, woo, that's not me? And then how do they bring them all together so that they can collaborate in a way that gets the best out of everyone? So this is putting in action, like, oh, you tend to be naturally a positive leader. I never thought about that one. How do I use that in my practice? Or, I see you as more of a servant leader. I think that's really great. You're humble, you're respectful, but maybe you need to be more directive at times. So how do you change? How do you add that to your portfolio? I mean, what I'm doing when I facilitate is trying to get them to see these capacities as a portfolio of capabilities that they want to round out. And then what do you need to change? What do you want to practice? What do you want to take on that's new? Puts you at a little bit of an edge, and then get some feedback. And then keep going, because it's a lifelong journey.
It definitely does. I noticed in your endorsements, one of our mutual friends, Marshall Goldsmith, I made the trek out to Nashville, did the little loop with him on the circle route, came by his house. He has the marshallgoldsmith.ai. When are we going to see the Coach May and the Jeffrey AI?
You never know. it could be sometime soon.
Yeah.
At this point, AI could probably have written the book, but we did the hard work of actually looking at the research and actually creating a framework. So yeah, it's changing fast. And whatever we can do to get this material, this profound framework out into the world, if AI can help, more power to it.
Wonderful. Margaret Moore, Jeffrey Hull, co-authors of The Science of Leadership, 9 Ways to Expand Your Impact, available on Amazon, just came out 10 days ago. And of course, catch it there. And of course, where books are sold. We're happy that you're here. We'll see you back in the green room. And thanks a lot for being on the show. Really appreciate it. We're going to go into some notes for next week's show. And of course, we'll see you in the green room. Thank you. All right, everybody, that's episode 305. A lot of insights to put into pack. And of course, we're going to talk more. There's no show on August 1st. We're at our Analyst Relations Experience and Summer Solstice, for those who know that's what that is. But we'll be back August 8th with Sanjeev Sahu, President, Global Platform Group at Ingram Micro. Tim Christopherson, Vice President of Climate Action at Salesforce, author of Generation Restoration, is a board member. And of course, we might have a special guest with a brand new book to preview. So I'll leave it at that. With that, if it's Friday, it's DisrupTV, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, almost every Friday for the last 10 years and more. And of course, we love your suggestions in terms of what's good, who we should talk to. Authors, CEOs, startup founders, and of course, the folks that are leading the conversation where technology is headed next. Thanks, everybody, and see you in 2 weeks.